Hi guys, Dr. Mel here. We're busy with chemistry and looking at the actual rate of energy transfer in a chemical reaction. Let's have a look at the mechanism that's actually taking place when a chemical reaction is going from a reactant to a product. So we've done the rate of reactions and looked at the factors. We did all the definitions and we said it will not happen if it's not an effective collision. And that also is dependable on the orientation of the atoms and molecules. We can calculate the rate of reaction with a graph, and we can measure the rate with either the pH changing, the mass changing, or the concentration changing. And now we're going to look at the mechanism that's going to take place. So the mechanism is the steps that's in the reaction, and we're going to actually pull it apart and see exactly what's happening in the reaction. So what happens here is that we'll have energy changes. So what we have in this side of all chemical reactions is the reactants. So for this reactant to become a product, they first have to be pulled apart. So the zinc solid molecule, it's actually the atoms, will need to be broken. So energy is needed to break those pieces of zinc from each other and make that zinc 2 plus. So you can see there's an electron transfer, ions will be formed, and if you go this side, you'll see I've got zinc 2 plus here. On the other hand, I've got hydrogen linked to chlorine. So the chloride ion there is already a chloride ion, and the hydrogen is there. And if you have a look, you'll see the hydrogen will form hydrogen gas. So there's a lot of mechanisms in terms of movement that's going to take place in a chemical reaction. And if we talk about movement, we're talking about energy. So firstly, we need to break bonds. So we need to absorb energy. And we use the word endo, meaning in. So we're putting in energy, we're pulling those apart, and then as soon as they move towards each other, they will release that energy that we put into the reaction, and it's exit. So it's released, it's exothermic. So we need to see, is there more going in or out, and that will give me the net energy. So we draw graphs. It's much easier to draw a graph, and you've done this in previous grades. So you can have a look at those lessons where we actually did the graphs of a chemical reaction. Firstly, we can start with a reactant here and go up, and remember that's the activated complex. There we find the product, so it gave a release or gave off that energy there. The energy that went in is the activation energy that side. On the other graph, you'll see I'm starting there and the product is down here. So now you can see the energy that went in is there and the energy that went out is there. This will then be the energy pulling the molecules or atoms apart and pulling them together again. So that's the release of energy. Now we need to determine, it started here, it ended there. So I gained energy. So it's more energy in, therefore this is an endothermic reaction. On the other hand, I started there, I'm ending here. So you can see I've got less energy then, and this is therefore an exothermic reaction. You've done this in the previous grades and previous lessons, so go and have a look at that. Let me just quickly repeat that because I want to do the enthalpy. I'm starting here. The reactants will have some energy. Let's say, for instance, it's got 100 kilojoule energy. It goes up to the activated complex. Let's say it's 200 kilojoule, and it's releasing, and when it's here, it's at 50 kilojoules. So now 2 more important aspects that you've got to know. Quickly, get the net. It started with 100 there. It's ended with 50 there. So what do? I now allocate the delta H, or the heat of the reaction. It's down, so it's less, so it's a negative delta H. We can also write the chemical reaction by saying it's the reactants that's got the same energy as the product, but it released energy. So your energy will be on the side where the products are. So that's important. It's negative delta H, and it's an energy at the side of the product. On the other hand, you'll find the endothermic. I'm starting there, I'm going up there, and then I'm ending there. Now let's allocate values again. Let's say this is starting at 100 kilojoules, going up to 200 kilojoules, and here I am at 150 kilojoules. So I gained energy from there, therefore it is a positive delta H, and if I write down the reaction, it will be the reactants there plus that delta H, which is the 50, will give me the same energy as the product. So, just in short, guys, remember, if it's an exothermic like this one, it will be negative, and you write it next to the product. If it is a endothermic, it's a positive H, and you write the energy because it's going in. Right, what happens when you use a catalyst? A catalyst doesn't change the reactants, nor does it change the product, but it actually lowers the activation energy. Remember, the activation energy is there. So when I use a catalyst, can you see there? I'm lowering that, and it actually speeds up the reaction. So it's an alternative route. You can see there's the catalyst. It lowers that energy of the activation energy, whether it's an endothermic like this one or an exothermic like that one. It's always lower than the ones where we didn't use a catalyst. Just one extra piece of advice again. We always work towards the forward reaction, but we could have done this with the reverse reactions as well. So I could have said, I'm starting here, I'm going up, and I'm going there. So then this would be the reactants, and that would be the products. That's specifically for the reverse reaction. And you'll see you can get questions like that. What is the activation energy? To start any reaction, you need activation energy. So it's the energy that's absorbed to break the existing bonds of the reactants. Let's go back to our graph. The reactants are here. We need to put in energy breaking these bonds in the reactants to get to the activated complex. What is the activated complex? It's a high energy, unstable transition state. So I'll draw a few diagrams just now where I will show you where the molecules are. But interesting now, in both cases, the activated complex is up there. It's loose atoms or ions. It's not bound to each other like there. And it is, remember the word, it's high energy. And you can see it on our graphs. It's high energy there. And it's unstable. It doesn't want to be like that. It needs a bond. It needs to be together. And it's only a transition. And as soon as it forms the product, it will release that energy again. And in our graphs, we see from that activated complex, it's going down because it releases that energy. This we've done before. Now we're going to a new explanation of what's actually happening in a chemical reaction. Two mathematicians actually looked at the probability of the energy in a reaction. One guy was James Maxwell and the other one Ludwig Boltzmann. And we named their findings and the graphs that they actually put this into so that we can understand the Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution curve. So James Maxwell and Ludwig Boltzmann researched and they measured and they looked at the actual happenings in the chemical reaction. What they found is the following. they saw that we can actually measure the number of molecules and we can measure the average energy. So in here we can have, let's say for instance, 200 molecules where a few of them will have that energy, a little bit more of them will have more. So you can see these are, let's say for instance, 50. No, that's too much. Let's make that 25. This can be 60. And you will find under this, I've got in total now 200 molecules. They have an average that's more or less there. Some more, some less, and basically that's the distribution. That is how the Maxman-Boltzmann distribution curve looks like. So you need to be able to interpret the Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution curve. Firstly, the axes. On this side, we'll have the number of particles. So it's the number of molecules or atoms that you have. On this side here, we've got on our x-axis the energy. And we saw just now when we had this curve that it'll look something like this. So it will be a curve looking like that. That's important, guys, that you know how to draw it because you have to interpret that. And remember in our previous graph, we actually had a few there, a few there, a few there, and you can relate to that. Right, that's not what we want to do now. We want to see how did they interpret the chemical reaction. So here at the higher end, with the higher kinetic energy, and you know that's related to the speed of the molecules, they only found that it's a few molecules that actually have enough kinetic energy. If it's got enough kinetic energy, it's effective collisions. So it's only these that will be actually participating in the chemical reaction. None of these have enough energy to actually go into breaking bonds or forming new bonds. So we concentrate on these high energy molecules, and they have enough kinetic energy. Now, to complete this, we've got most of the particles with moderate energy. You can see here in this part of this curve. On the other hand, we also have a few with very little energy, low kinetic energy. And as I said, the ones that we are concerned with are these ones with the effective collisions or suitable high kinetic energy. I just want to take you back to the graph that we drew with the potential energy, the reactants there, and we went up to the activated complex. Can you remember we just did that? Well, this energy here, the activation energy, is indicated here on this graph there. So those that reaches the activated complex there is those there that has enough energy to actually go and have a good reaction and take place. Right, let's see. If I change the temperature, I first have this, you can see that. What will happen if I change the temperature? I will increase the kinetic energy, so more particles will have more energy here. Let's have a look. I'm increasing the energy. I'm not increasing the number of molecules. So I'll still have these. I'm just pushing it now. Have a look. I'm pushing it here because more of them will have enough energy. So more effective collisions. What will happen if I change the concentration? Well, that's my initial curve. If I now lower the concentration, it will probably be something like that. And if I increase the concentration, it will go more. So this is the part that you are interested in. Have a look at that. I'm decreasing the concentration. Can you see I'm lowering the number of molecules in the effective collision or the high energy side? Right, what does a catalyst do? Remember when we did this graph, we said a catalyst will lower the activation energy. If it lowers the activation energy, it does that. So let's draw the Maxwell-Boltzmann. Let's say this is our curve. If we now add a catalyst, we'll actually find that it's still there, but on that curve there, but it is now there, the activation energy, where the previous activation energy was there. So more particles can participate because they have enough activation energy. Guys, you need to know concentration, temperature, catalyst. And you can see here, it changed the activation energy from there to there because I'm using the catalyst. The rate we know, higher temperature, more particles faster reaching that point there. So more particles have enough kinetic energy and form effective collisions. Concentration again, if I've got a higher concentration, it will go faster if I take the time there. Obviously, if I've got a limiting reactant, it will be used up much earlier than the other ones. So it's very important that you see the limiting reaction finishing before the lower concentration. The rate of reaction will be determined by the limiting reactant, and obviously the excess will just be in excess. Right, a catalyst on the other hand will speed up the process, the time will be faster. And for a last look at Maxwell-Boltzmann, let's just see most of the particles have average. The few particles with enough will be indicated there, and that's my activation energy. Right, if we get a question like this, let's see how we're going to answer it. The question is, students took sodium thiosulfate and they reacted it with dilute hydrochloric acid. They found that we found sodium chloride, we found sulfur, water, as well as sulfur dioxide as a product. They did 3 investigations. The one is just doing the tempo or the rate of reaction. Can you see the rate? And as the concentration increased, the rate increased. They want us to write down the dependent variable. What is the dependent variable? Well, the dependent will be the change in concentration or the forming of the product or the negative reactant or the positive product that's forming. What will be a conclusion? Well, the rate will actually be increasing as we increase the concentration. It's not directly proportional, but it's an increase. The second question, what does line P represent in a graph like this? If this was experiment A, what does line P represent? You know line P is the activation energy. You need to know that. Which curve has the higher temperature? You can see here, B has more particles there. So it's B. Explain the increase in temperature with collision. You know, if I increase the temperature, I'm increasing the kinetic energy. Therefore, the orientation and collisions will be more effective. Guys, that's the word you have to use. The final question, 2 experiments here, X and Y, and this is now the reaction coordinate with the potential energy. Give a reason why Y is different to X. You can see Y will have a catalyst. It's lowering the activation energy. So these are the type of questions that you have to apply in terms of Maxwell-Boltzmann and mechanism. We did Maxwell-Boltzmann. We had a look at all the factors. You can do the graphs, that's exo and endothermic, and you should be able to work with a catalyst in terms of these graphs. This is complex work, guys. You've got to have a look at this video clip again, answer questions, and see that you can grasp this because it's going to be in every paper. Bye-bye.